Now I want you to come with me to Cana, because the next chapter of John's Gospel talks about Christ's first miracle. Let me read you from John chapter 2. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Dear woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "Mine hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." And then the time came when Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." They filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out. Take it to the master of the banquet." They did so. Note, the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He said everybody brings out the choice wine first. Then when the appetite's dulled and the palate no longer functioning well, after that, at the end, they bring the cheaper wine. But you've saved the best until now. So the master of the feast gives testimony that the wine was wonderful wine, and the servants knew a miracle had taken place. Well, why is this story important? Here the Son of God, after the wilderness of temptation, fighting the devil, comes to a rustic village home to be at a wedding. I want you to notice that Jesus endorsed marriage. Let me read you from the 19th chapter of Matthew's Gospel. It couldn't be clearer than what it says here. Listen very carefully. Chapter 19, verse 4. "Haven't you read," Jesus replied, "that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason, a man," notice, a man, "will leave his father and mother, be united to his wife," notice, not wives, wife, "and the two will become one flesh. So they're no longer two but one. Therefore what God has joined together, let man not put asunder." It's very clear that Jesus believed in the institution of Eden, marriage, one man, one woman, who become one flesh, that a child might be born. Automatically, some of you watching have the phrase same-sex marriage running through your heads. Dear friends, many things should be said on this topic. The first is homophobia is sin. The hatred, the acrimony with which professed Christians deal with homosexuals is not acceptable to God. It is a sin. If you talk, as I have talked, to homosexual friends, you'll find that a large proportion of them will say, "I didn't choose it. I found I was homosexual." It's important to know that. But it's not just a social issue, it's a moral issue. Many recognise that. But there's a third issue you may not have thought about. It's a medical issue. Millions of doctors in the world know that homosexual practice is a very dangerous practice, liable to shorten the life by about 20 years. Anal cancer is 60 times, 60 times more likely in someone practicing homosexuality. Please see the distinction I'm trying to make. There's no sin in being a homosexual. There's both sin and folly in homosexual practice. I'd like to read to you one or two quotations from what I think is the most accurate book that's been written on this topic. It's a book by a graduate of Harvard, Robert A. Gagnon. Its theme is the Bible and homosexual practice. This book has been endorsed by some of the best scholars I've ever heard of. I. Howard Marshall, Douglas Moo, C.K. Barrett, James D.G. Dunn, and so on. I want to share with you one or two of the things he says, that we may not make the mistake of homophobia or the mistake of homosexual practice. God loves the homosexual, died for him or her. They're precious to him. He does not want them to violate the temple of God, which is their body. The Bible in several places forbids homosexual practice, but I want to read you a modern scholar and some of the things that he mentions. One important thing is he reminds us that while the homosexual who practices homosexuality looks on monogamy as the same as monotony, and as a result has many partners, sometimes 1,000 partners in a lifetime. Let me read you one quotation. This is from page 453. All the data for homosexual conduct indicates it has a very poor track record so far as enduring monogamous relationships. You understand what he's saying? This writer, like millions of doctors, is saying a primary problem with homosexual practice is it is unsafe, it is dangerous, it'll bring pain, it'll bring many diseases, it'll bring an early death. So this man illustrates the point that most homosexuals, are not monogamous. A non-random study of nearly 1,000 homosexuals in the San Francisco Bay Area was conducted by Bell and Weinberg in 1970. It reported that 84% of white homosexual males had 50 or more homosexual partners in their lifetime. Did you get that? 84% had 50 or more homosexual partners in their lifetime. It's just as dangerous for heterosexuals to have many partners. That must be said. Within this group of 50 partners, only 3% had fewer than 10 homosexual partners during their lifetime. Fewer. Within the group of 50 plus partners, 28% had over 1,000 partners. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine anything further from what I read you in Matthew 19? Over 1,000 partners. 28%. The statistics for lesbians were significantly less shocking. That's very important. But still bad. About a quarter of homosexual females had fewer than 5 homosexual partners in their lifetime. An additional 30% had 5 to 9 partners. Only 7% had 50 or more partners. So sometimes a lesbian may have 50 or more partners. They do not have the same risk of the male homosexual. but it is a great risk to go against the Word of God. Let me read you another statement. A book is mentioned, quoted, Homosexuality and the Politics of Truth, written by psychiatrist Jeffrey Satinover. He argued that one way to determine the moral desirability of homosexuality is to examine the medical facts. That is my main point here, that homosexual practice is not just a social issue. Same-sex marriage is not just a moral issue, it is a medical issue. The psychiatrist says, should society think if a relative, friend or colleague had a condition that is routinely, if not always, associated with the following problems, and here are the problems: a significantly decreased likelihood of establishing or preserving a successful marriage. 2, a 5 to 10 year decrease in life expectancy. 3, chronic, potentially fatal liver disease, hepatitis, inevitably fatal esophageal cancer, pneumonia, internal bleeding, serious mental disabilities, many of which are irreversible, a much higher than usual incidence of suicide. Now, the interesting thing about this quote is, and he unveils his secret a little further on, he says, I've been talking about alcoholics. Now he says, let me give you the facts on homosexuals. And he goes on and he says, inevitable fatal immune disease, 25 to 30 year decrease in life expectancy, chronic, potentially fatal liver disease, increasing the fact of liver cancer, multiple bowel and other infectious diseases, a much higher than usual incidence of suicide, and so on. There's a secular writer saying you shouldn't view homosexual practice, same-sex marriage, as just social or even moral. It is a medical issue. The person who pursues with a multitude of partners, male partners, homosexuality, is sure to contract a great number of diseases and shorten his life. Back to Cana. This story is meant to tell us something about life. You remember the head man at the marriage said, it's customary to give the good wine first and bad wine last. You've reversed it. Well, the world follows that practice. When you're young, the world seems bright, full of opportunity. You are filled with ambition. But my friends, the world's banquet can end in sorrow, in pain, in disappointment. Many people by middle life are tired of life. The shadows increase as they get older, and the last years are years of misery. And remember, twice as many people in the world suicide as commit murder. This story about changing the water into wine is to tell us that Jesus can transform things. He can take the bitter things in our life, and we all have them. He can turn them into something wonderful if we let him. You know, when a storm comes down, the leaves are blown off the tree. We look at the naked branches, but if it's night time, through the branches we'll see the stars. William Cooper, sometimes called Cowper, wrote, "Ye fearful saints, fresh courage take. The clouds you so much dread are big with mercy and will fall in blessing on your head." What a wonderful thing to know of Christ, who can transform things. He transforms the ordinary and the usual, but he can transform the bitter and the disappointing. He's the agent of change for the better. May I remind you that the way human beings are pictured in the Gospel of John is to underline their troubles. Here's the first miracle, and it pictures a situation where joy is gone. Joyless. Jesus is the joy bringer. When we move on, we'll read the story of a nobleman whose son has lost his health. So have millions. Go a little further, a man who's lost his strength, can't even get up from his bed, 38 years sick. We turn the page to chapter 6, and there are 5,000 men and women and children who are very, very hungry, but they have no food till Christ provides. Then a little later on, we find the disciples of Christ, and they have no safety. They're in a storm. The waves are high. They forget that whatever's about to crush on their head is under the feet of Christ. Oh, my friend, if you and I could only remember that. Whatever threatens to come down on our heads is under the feet of Christ. They're in a storm. Their ship is sinking, but Jesus is walking on the waves toward them. And he says, be of good cheer. So here's a matter of loss of safety. So far we have said loss of joy, loss of health, loss of strength, loss of food. Here's loss of safety. We turn the page or two, we find a man born without sight. And then the 11th chapter, a man dead without life. Friend, my very dear friend, my brother, my sister, if you do not have Christ, your life will ultimately be joyless. Your health will suffer, your strength may decline, you'll feel that nothing nourishes you, you'll feel that life is a dangerous affair and you'll be full of fear. And because you can't see God, you're spiritually blind, you are spiritually dead. But the story of Cana encourages us. Jesus is the joy bringer. He can transform anything. He can take the bitter and turn it into sweet. He can take the ordinary and make it wonderful. And never forget, he endorsed everything that God introduced before the fall of our first parents. The fourth commandment and marriage came in before the fall, and they're meant to remain sacred all through human existence. God grant you and I may see the wisdom of agreeing with the one who has loved us enough to die for us. God bless you.